This one's for all my stitching friends. We're gonna create a quick stitching log. Now, this is particularly pertinent if you're using Pattern Keeper or PK, because it has taken me a lot of trial and error to find the right mix of ease of entry for information and accuracy, because anyone who's used Pattern Keeper for a while will know that if you just enter how many stitches it says you do every day, your log's going to become inaccurate. And that has to do with the date, because if you ever frog any stitches, which you're a nutcase if you don't frog stitches, everybody frogs stitches. Whenever you do that, that's what causes things to mess up. So this uses a little bit of different math, but still makes it super easy to log, because all you have to do is enter the numbers that you see on your Pattern Keeper screen at that point in time, and all the rest of the math is done for you. And you'll see what I mean. It's actually super simple to set up, so we're gonna just go ahead and do it. We're just gonna set it up. So the first thing you're gonna do if you're in Notion, which the only thing I use Notion for anymore is this stitching stuff. I have done it in Excel. It is possible to do in Excel, but I really do like the Notion version. It's got a little something that I can't quite mimic. And since I'm not printing it, it reigns supreme. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna come over and we're gonna make a new page. So we're gonna call our page whatever we want. Let's say we call it the stitch room. And the first thing we're gonna do, don't worry, we'll make it pretty later, is we're gonna type the slash button and we're gonna type database. And we're gonna click database full page right here. Boop. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna call this our log. And if we want, we can even click up here and you can type calendar to filter it out. I happen to have calendar right here. Boom. We're gonna give it a little calendar icon. It makes it easier to identify at a glance. Log. Okay, here we go. So the first thing we have over here is a name. So we're just gonna change this. Well, we can actually leave this name. We're gonna leave this name. And then over here, we're gonna click the plus button. And then while our cursor is still blinking over here on the right, we're gonna hit NU for number. And we're gonna select the number. What we just selected was our type. Basically, are we doing a numerical value, an alpha value, a date value? It just changes the data type. So this is going to actually be our session. That's what I like to call it. And what this is going to be, every time we log, when Pattern Keeper tells us we did 200, 500, 800 stitches that session, we're gonna put that number here. The next number we're gonna do, and we're gonna type NU for number, and total. So every time I add a new property, the first thing I do is type a pair of letters to make the list a little smaller to choose from. So we're going to another number. This is our total. This is probably the most important number. What this number is when you use Pattern Keeper or most other stitching programs, but when you use Pattern Keeper, what you're gonna see on the side of the screen there is a total number of stitches done in the project compared to the total number of stitches in the project. The total number done, that's where all the math is going to be derived from, because that's where your accuracy is. So that is why we have both these numbers here. But the good news is they're super easy to enter whenever you do this, because both numbers are provided for you on your screen at that point in time. So now that we're done with our log, at least for the moment, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our stitch room using the breadcrumbs up here in the upper left. We're going to click down here in the empty space. We're going to type slash. We're going to type database. We're going to type full page database, and we're coming over here and we're going to type projects. This is going to be our projects database, and we can actually make this a lot more fluffy and complicated if we want. We can also make it more simple if we want. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to leave the name here alone. This is going to be our project name. Now we're going to actually pause it here. We're going to go back to our stitching room, back to our log, and this is where it gets a little tricky, if anything. We're going to hit the new button. We're going to type RE to adjust our list over here, and we're going to type relation. And then in the list of relations, we're going to see that log, we're going to see that projects. I had to type PRO to search for it because I have so many databases, but we're going to see our projects database there. That's the one we want. See, we're in the log over here on the left. We're in the projects We're hooking it up to the projects. Don't accidentally pick the database that you're already in. Pick the other one. We're going to pick projects from here. We're going to set this up as two-way relation right here, and we're going to click add relation. So bam, right there you see this projects column. So we're going to go back to our stitch room. We're going to get back to our projects, and we're going to go ahead and hit that new page button. And we're going to put in an example project so that A, it's easier to set this whole thing up, but B, you can kind of see how it's working as we go. So now that we've set up our example project, we're gonna go back to our log. And then over here, we're gonna type new page, and I like to call this base. Normally I would type in the name of the project I'm working on, but for right now, we're gonna call this base. And this is particularly for projects you have already started, which I'm assuming if you're watching this and setting this up, you have projects you've already started. So we're going to type base here. We're going to click in our projects column, and you'll notice that that example project that we set up is sitting right there. So we're going to click that. Now, it doesn't make the whole menu disappear, so it can be a little confusing at first. Once we click on it, what it does is it pops down here with a little minus sign on the right. It is selected, it is there, it just, the whole menu box doesn't disappear like you might think it might when you click that, but that's fine. The reason it does that is so that you can select multiple projects. We're never going to do that. We're only ever going to select one project, but there we go. And just for giggles, I'm going to put in how many total stitches I have. In fact, I'm just going to type 1845 because that's how many I have total on one of my other projects. So that's the number we're going to use. So this is what I mean when I say a base. We're always going to start one entry, and we're going to put in how many stitches we've done total on that project. This is our starting point. Now, in the future, when we want to log, it'll be a smidge different, but you'll see that here in a bit. So now we have an example project, and we have our very first entry, which has our current total in it. You know, how many stitches we've done on this project. We're going to go back here to the stitch room, back in projects, and now we're going to get into the real nitty gritty of this whole thing. So the first thing we're going to do, hit this plus button, type in U for number, because the first thing we're going to add is a number. Bloop. Now we're going to call this number total. Now I know that looks kind of similar because we just entered a total not that long ago, but bear with. What we're going to put here is the total number of stitches required for this project. So let's say it's 24,500. So once I've done 24,500 stitches, I will be done with this project. That's what that number is, how many we need to get done. And we're going to go ahead and slide that over just like that. The next thing that we're going to add is we're going to click the button, and then we're going to type RO for roll up. That's what we want. We're going to click roll up. We're going to click the relation that we want, which is our log. Remember, we are in the project's database, so we're connecting to our log database, right? It should be the only option there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the property we're looking at. So what the rollup is probably a poor word. They probably should call this a lookup, not a rollup, if I were honest, because what this is this is telling a given column to go into another database and pull out a specific piece of information. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell it to go into that other database. We're going to tell it to look at the total column, aka the total number of stitches we have done thus far. And then we're going to come down here to calculate, and we're going to tell it to not show me the original. Pretty please do not show me that. What we're going to do is go down here to more options. We're going to hit the maximum option. What this means is that every time you enter your stitches, when you enter your new total, which is presumably always going to be higher, it's always going to pull that maximum value, because every time you stitch, you're going to enter a number that's higher than it was last time. So this means that this column is always going to be your total done so far. So we're gonna call it the done column, the done column. And then we can click on this little button right here, and we can even give it a little icon. So let's see, I might type in for number, because that's called a number sign. I might just change the little icon to a number sign. I just like the way that looks, so we're gonna do that here. I rearrange these columns as I go. You don't have to, but there we go. So we're already starting to see a bit of a picture here. because we entered in a example data or a initial first data set. Now you see what I mean when I say that building the rest of this is going to be a little bit easier, because now we know how many we've done total in the project and how many we need to do. So what that means is the next column we're going to add column, we're going to add the average. So I messed up there. We're actually going to type FO for formula. So what we're looking for is the formula data type. Now, if I don't type anything in here, all of the types of options are down here. So formula is in here. We can find it eventually. There it is. We can find formula. We don't have to type anything. I just do to make it faster. We're gonna do a formula specifically, and we're gonna call this formula average. And we're even gonna give it a little bit of a, ooh, there we go. I like this one. We're just gonna give it whatever item we wanna pick. Okay, and we're gonna let that go. Now we're gonna hit the new column button. We're gonna type DA for date, and sure enough, it suggests we pick start date. So it put in an automatic suggestion there for us. We're gonna choose that. We want the start date. We're also gonna click this plus button, add a new property, DA for date. We're gonna pick the date type. I'm gonna rename it to finish because I like finish as opposed to finish date. We're also going to click this button one more time. FO for formula. So now this formula is going to be what's called the approximate. So I just put APROX, approx. This is approximate. And the icon that I'm gonna give it, I'm gonna type CAL for calendar, and I'm gonna pick this icon because I like it. It could be whatever icon you want. What this stands for is your approximate finish date. We're actually gonna enter some information in there, and then it will always continuously calculate our approximate finish date for us when it thinks we're gonna finish based on how many stitches are left over and the average per day, etc. So we're gonna add a new column. We're gonna type FO for formula again. This time we're gonna name this one remain or remaining, if I spell it correctly. This is the number of stitches we have remaining in our project. Pretty simple. And in fact, with this particular one, we can come down here and we can pick any icon we want. I don't know. I'll pick the little android alien. It's like the arcade game where you have to shoot the little aliens. Let's pick that one. So now this time what we're gonna do is we're gonna hit this edit formula right here. Boop. Now don't be intimidated. It might look a little intense at first, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna click this total button. Bloop. And then we're gonna hit the minus key. And then we're gonna click the done button. Bloop. So the total minus the done. And this hopefully is self-explanatory. We're gonna change our decimal places to 0. I mean, it should always be a whole number, but just in case. And then there we go. So this gives us our number of stitches left to do. So now I'm actually gonna go ahead and slide this over so that my stitch counts are kind of next to each other here. Makes life a little easier. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this log button and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna right click it and I'm gonna go hide in view. This doesn't delete it, this just makes it so we don't have to look at it. Which is handy when you're trying to sort information. 90% of information organization, at least in my personal opinion, has to do with just fixing what you're looking at so that your brain isn't overwhelmed by extraneous inputs of information. Maybe that's just a me thing, I don't know, but could be. So right now we know for sure how many this project has. We know for sure we've done this many, and we have this many remaining. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna click this box, and our little formula box is gonna pop up because now obviously we need to figure out our average per day. Oh, real quick before we do that though, we're gonna go over here, we're gonna click this new button. We're gonna type RO for roll up yet again. We're gonna click roll up. The relation is the log. The property, it can be any of the properties that you want. We're gonna pick name in this case. But instead of show original, what we're gonna do is we're gonna count. And we're gonna count values. What this means is it's gonna count every time you log. And what we're gonna do is retitle this to days lookup. So what that means is the number of days you've worked on this project. specifically looking that up from your log. It's going to pull every time you log something, it's going to add a day, add a day, add a day every time you log something. Now, the only caveat with this is that that's great if you set all this up and then start a new project. But what happens if you have a project that you've already worked on? Particularly if you have a project where you already know how many days you've worked on it. If you have a project where you don't know how many days you've worked on it, you can always guess or just start from here. That's totally up to you. But for those who have tracked that and who do know, we're going to hit that plus button. We are going to type NU for number. We're going to add a new number column, and we're going to call this base days. And what this is this is the number of days that we already know we've worked on this project. So for example, the one that I'm thinking of, I've worked on 6 days, or, you know, I've stitched on it 6 times in a row. So I know I've worked on it 6 times. Now, if you know you've worked on it 6 days, but you have an entry where you're entering your stuff for the first time, notice there's a 1 here. So we're actually going to drop that down to 5 so that it makes 6 total. So if you have a project where you already know the number of days you've worked, and you're trying to be accurate, just remember to take it down by 1 so that when you add your first total in here, it'll be accurate. If you don't add a quote base unquote log, if you just immediately start logging, then you might not have to worry about that. But I'm just explaining that that's how this works. So I know I've worked 6 days on this project, so these two together make 6. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to hit the plus button one more time. We're going to hit FO for formula. It's starting to get real familiar. And I'm going to call this one days, just plain days. No additional word there, just the word days. And I'm also going to give it a little clock emoji. I'm going to give it a little clock. And what this formula is going to be, if you're probably already figuring out where this is going to go, but this is going to be the days lookup, and then the plus, and then the days, base days. So it's going to take the number of days you know you've already worked on this project, basically a manually entered number, and it's going to add how many days it sees that you've logged, and it's going to add all of that together. So that's going to be the total number of days that you've worked on this project. So there you go. The total number of days I've worked on this project is 6. Now, for entering a whole bunch of projects, you can leave these other 2 columns up. It'll make it easier if you want to add a new project, add a new project. If you want to start using this type of log slowly and you only want to add new projects as you work on them, what you can do is right-click hide, so that your base days and that kind of background math isn't in front of you all the time. You don't need to see that every day. You just need to know that you've worked 6 days on it. And now that you've started here, every time you log, that number will go up automatically when you log. It does it by itself. So whenever you add a new project, if you need to see any of the things that we've hidden, you can go over here to the open, and then you can see all of the things that you normally couldn't see. You can also go over here to these 3 dots, go down to properties, and you can see down here the things that we've hidden, and you can click the little eyeball to add them back in again. Pretty simple to do. But since we're doing just one project right now, I wanted to show you what that looks like so that you could see that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to enter a start date. Now I happen to know I actually started this project, the example project I'm thinking of, on the 18th of January 25. Now your start date will be whatever your start date is. This is just the one that I'm picking. Obviously our finish date is currently empty because we have not finished the project yet. We'll get to that later. So now we have a start date. Now we know how many days we've worked on this project, and we already know how many that we've done because Pattern Keeper told us how many we've done. So now we're going to go back over here to this average. We are going to take the total number that we've done. I type DO and then I click this little done option. We're going to take the number done and we're going to divide it by the days. Now remember to pick the days column, not the lookup or the base column. Basically what you want is the total number of days you've worked on this project. So we're going to hit the days column. So how many you've done divided by the total number of days you've worked on it, including days prior to you using this log, added to the days counted from the log, if that makes sense. So we're going to hit save, and there we go. Our average is about 300.5. So the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to click this average button. I'm going to click edit property, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to tell it 0 decimal places so that it kind of rounds up, because I want to look at it as whole stitches, right? So now that we've got our average per day, how many's left, how many needs to be done, how many we have done, now what we're going, and the number of days we've worked on, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do the approximate. Now we're going to go over here into our approximate date. Now this one's a little bit more goofy, so I'm going to go ahead and paste in here what the formula actually looks like. And down here, it's actually going to give us what the answer is. So I'll kind of walk you through this a little bit, but if you want, you could just pause this and like literally copy paste this into your own thing. So what you're going to do is format date with a capital D on the date, and then the parentheses, and you're going to do now with a double parentheses, a period, and then date add, and then another parentheses. Then what you're going to do is you're going to type remain, and it'll show up down here, and you can click the remain button, divided by the average, comma, you're going to type the word days in parentheses, and then another closing parentheses. So notice we've got a couple of open parentheses. Now we need to start closing them off. So we're going to close one here. We're going to do comma, and then you'll notice inside quotation marks, MMDDYYYY, that's month, day, year. And if you wanted to, you could actually change that up a little bit. You could do, so if I click here, they'll even give me some suggestions. So if I do MMD, Y, it'll actually spit out the word April 3rd, 2025. If I do 4Ys-MM-DD, it'll actually spit out the year with a dash, the month with a dash. So you get the idea that this last bit right here is what you want your date to look like. I happen to prefer the month, day, year format, but down here are some examples of how you could use a different format. That's what these quotation marks are for, is for formatting the date so what you see looks like a date. And you can actually have it say the name of the month if you want. What this bit is, so this format date in the beginning, the reason why all of this gobbledygook is nestled inside those parentheses is because we're telling the computer, hey, I have some data. I want that data to look like a date I can read. That's what that format date is. What this part is now means take the day it is today, and then this date add, that means add a number of days. So what this basically is we're taking the time it is right now and we're adding a certain number of days. How many days do we add? Well, that's the remain divided by the average. So the number of stitches we have left divided by our average stitch per day. So we're taking how much we have left, dividing it by how much we do on average. We're taking that as a number, we're adding it to today's date, and then we're formatting the whole thing to look like a nice pretty date. So that's kind of the breakdown of what that is. But if you really wanted to, you could just pause the video and copy paste this right into, I'll even paste it in the description. You can copy paste this right into this column and click save. So now that's exactly what I explained is exactly what it's doing. What it's doing is it's taking the average number of stitches I've done per day. I've worked on it for 6 days. I've gotten this many done. So on average, I do about 300 stitches in a sit down. So if I continue to do that per sit down, then I'll be done in around June 16th, 2025. And because all of that is formulated based on this average, and because that average is based on what we have done versus how long we've done it, it'll constantly be adjusting itself. So every time you look in here, that approximate finish date will actually change to guesstimate what that project will actually look like. So, and for the most part, that's pretty much it. If you really want to, one thing that my sister does love, so I'll show you how I do that, is we hit FO for formula, and we're gonna title this one percentage, or if you're lazy like me, you use the % sign. And then in the formula, what we're going to do is we're going to take the done divided by the total, actually, excuse me. So the done divided by the total, we're going to put little parentheses around them. And then we're going to multiply that, or use the asterisk, by 100. So we're going to save. And what that's going to do is it's going to spit out a ridiculous looking long number. We're going to go over here to the decimal places. We're going to hit 2. And that's going to take it down to 2 decimal places. That is our percentage completion. If you're good at math, you probably already figured that out. But in case you're not, this is our percentage completion. And now the next fun little thing that we can do is over here, while this is still open, you see how this says number and then bar and then ring? Well, we can actually click this bar button. And what that does is that adds a progress bar into this. So now as I get higher than 7%, this bar will slowly fill. And you can, if you want to edit the property, you can even come down here and turn the number on or off. I believe my sister likes it on, but yeah, that's pretty much all you do. You just click that bar button and then it turns it into a little progress bar for you. In fact, you can even take that. I'm moving the columns just by clicking and dragging them. You can click it, drag it, move it over here, and you got your little completion. And that's pretty much it. Now, the best part about this setup is as soon as I have another project that I'm working on, all I have to do when I'm in my project, I can click down here or I can click up here in new. It doesn't matter which. And I can add a new project. So if I click here and I go project number 2, there, now I've added a new project, and every single one of those boxes, it's all already done for us. We don't have to do anything extra. I can come over here. Let's say this particular project a little smaller. Let's say it's 18,000 total. That's not bad. And let's say I started it today. There we go. Now, anytime I want to log my stitches, all of that other stuff is all set up for me. So the next thing that you can do, well, actually, I'll save that for a bit. This is extra credit stuff. We're going to go back to the primary stuff. So let's go back to our stitch room. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to our log. We're going to click this the little dots right here. You can use these dots to drag things around. We're going to click these little dots right here. And when we click these little dots, we're going to go turn into inline database. Bloop. And so that's going to turn this thing into an inline database. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to click these little 3 dots right here, or you can also click this little table tab, whatever you prefer. And we're going to edit view. We're going to go over here to the view. We're going to click this layout button, and we're going to tell it to show us a calendar, not a list. We don't want a list. We want a calendar. So now this is where it really gets magical, and you can do this from your phone or computer. It looks a little better on a computer. You can totally do it from a phone. If we're on our computer, we can come here. So let's say today I stitch on some stuff. So I'm going to hit the new button. Say I'm going to stitch on that example project. I just type example. The reason I type that there is so that I know what I did. But this is where it gets really important. So even though I typed the name of my project up here, what's really important is that where it says down here, where it says projects, I actually click this and I click example project. Now you can tell it's linked to the project because this little minus button has appeared. And when it's not linked, you'll just see them in a list. When it is linked, you'll see it up here on its own, and you'll see the rest of your projects down here in a separate list. So now we know it's linked. Now we're going to put how many I did this session, how many Pattern Keeper told me I did. This number doesn't have to be accurate. It can be whatever Pattern Keeper told you did that day. This is just for your personal records and your personal know so that you can see what's going on. But here's where it gets really important. This is where we need to know how many we now have totally done on that project. So let's say after tonight, I've done 1956. That's not actually 300. Just pretend with me, okay? So now that we've made that, now we're going to click out in the blank space, and now we see that today we stitched on example project. But we don't see how many we did that day. I'd like to see that. So we're going to click these 3 buttons. We're going to click to properties. And remember what I said earlier about the ones that are hidden are down here below? Well, these are all hidden, but I want to see my session. So I'm going to click this little eyeball. Bloop. So now when I come to my calendar, every time I enter a stitch, so let's say I go over here, I type in project 2, I associate it with project number 2, click out. I say how many I've done that session, however many it may be, and now the new amount that I've done is 240 stitches. So now you go. So now every time you log, you're gonna see what project you worked on, and you're gonna see how many you did. And if you don't like the fact that this calendar is a little small, you can also go over here to the big 3 dots in the corner, and you can tell it to make this a full width page. Vioop. And that's just gonna make it take the full width of the page. It's gonna make it really big if you like really big things. So this is your log. That's basically it. Now, if after we have entered these 2 numbers, if we go back to our projects, you'll notice that all of this math is going to have updated. So now, because I entered a new log on that example project, my average went down because I did a session that mathematically was only 100 stitches. It wasn't 300, even though that's what Pattern Keeper said I did, but I really only did 100. And as long as those totals match up, it'll be accurate. And this is an average anyways. So if you have several days in a row where you do lower counts, your average is gonna go down. That's kind of basic mathematics. So my average actually went down to 279 because of that log that I've entered. But it also now has me sitting at 7 days. And because that went down, my approximate finish date extended out a couple of days. So you see all of this updates. This even went up to 7.89%. So all of this stuff is continuously updating all the time. You never really have to mess with it. You never really have to touch it. And anytime you want to add a new project, you just add a new project. All the math is done. Once you've set this up, it's all done. And then you're just going to go back into your stitch room and then boom, there you go. That is literally it. That whole process took half an hour with me having to stop and explain it all. So, and I know I talk fast and move fast because I'm familiar with the program, but half an hour, you can set this all up. All you got to do is go on your phone, go on your computer, add a log, boom, done. You can sit here and add all of your current projects in one go if you want. I love data entry, so I did that for my sister because it entertains me. Or you don't have to. You could just leave it like this, and then the next time you pull out one of your whips, add a new whip, add your start date, all that fun stuff. Now that we've spent a half an hour setting that up, let's go into some extra credit stuff because this gets a little fun. So what we can do is a couple of things. First thing we could do is we can take our projects and we can move it down here. You can grab the little 3 dots down here to move things around. You can do that on your phone, but I highly recommend doing that part on a computer. The click and drag moving around is easier on a computer. And we can do the same thing we did before. We can click those 3 dots and we can turn it into an inline. That means that, boom, all of our information is right here. So now we're going to click this table and we're going to rename this table. We're going to call it WYPS for whips, works in progress. Now what we're going to do is we're going to hide the finish date because we don't need to see it because, well, if it has a finish date, it's not a whip, is it? I can also hide the start date because me personally, I'm not particularly interested in seeing that all the time, every time. I'll go look at that later. So I also don't necessarily need to see all of these. I'm a very simple person, so I'm gonna hide these. They didn't disappear, they didn't delete, I'm hiding them. So all I get to see is the percentage, how many I've done, my average, when I might get finished, and how many days I've worked on it. That's about where I wanna be. That's about what I wanna look at. So the next thing we're gonna do is hit this little plus button up here, and we're gonna add a new table. And we're gonna call this table finish. Now here's where it gets a little bit interesting. So now when we entered our finish, it kept all of our same columns that we have before. But we're gonna change that. We're gonna go over here to these 3 dots. We're gonna go to that properties area that I was showing you about before, where we see hidden stuff and shown stuff. So now we're going to change some things. Now we're going to get rid of the approximate and all of that, because if a project's already finished, we don't need to know some of that stuff we don't need to know. We are going to show the start date. We are going to show the finish date. I am going to keep the number of days because I think that's kind of cool. So for finished project, that's really all I want to do. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a filter, and I'm going to filter by finish date. That's gonna add a little filter over here. Now this sets up this whole big wonky calendar. We don't want any of that. We're gonna go way to the top of this calendar, and we're going to change this second bit. So this right here where it says is relative, yeah, never mind. We don't want that. Click that, click is not empty. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna filter. So when we click this finish tab, we're not gonna see anything unless it's actually finished. The next thing we're gonna do, in fact, we could have done this before, but when we were setting up, but we're gonna go over here to layout. We're gonna click layout, and actually I'm gonna hit gallery is what I'm gonna do. And what that's gonna do, it's gonna do a little bit something funky. So if we go back to our whips, let's say I have a whip, right? I have a project, and I'm gonna go ahead and click the open button so that I can fill in the rest of this data over here without having to change what this looks like down here. So we're gonna say that the total number on this project is like, you know, something really tiny, like 2,500 or there we go. There's one that I have that's actually like 7,500. It's really small. 7,500, there we go. And we're gonna pretend that we stitched the last few stitches on that here. So we're gonna click here. This is us logging our last few stitches. We've just finished this project, right? We did the last 100 stitches. So now we've done, our new total is 7,500. So now if we click out of here and we go down here, you're gonna see it went to 100%. Well, now that I've done 100%, I'm gonna open this back up and I'm going to set the finish date to today. Whoop. So I finished this project. We're just pretending here. I would never finish a project that fast, but we're just pretending here, okay? So now we're going to, in our whips section here, we are going to set our filter just like we did before. In fact, I probably should have done this before creating the example, but bear with. We're going to select finish date, and just like we did the first time, we're going to go to this is relative derbidadur, but this time we're going to say if the finish date is empty. So what you're going to notice there is that project I just finished is no longer showing here, because in order to be a whip, the finish date has to be empty. If the finish date is not empty, it's no longer a whip. So now we're going to go over here to finish, and now we're going to see it in our gallery. And the reason why I set it a gallery, and I'll do this here real quick too. We'll go over to our properties again with that hidden stuff, and we're gonna go finish and start. Yeah, let's just do that. Let's just do finish, start, and days, so that it shows those things. So we see our finish date, our start date, and our days. Now we actually don't have our start date, and our number of days is 1. So let's open this up and let's set a start date, because we don't actually have one. Let's say our start date was a month ago. We're setting an example start date. There we go. So now we see our finish date, our start date, and if you had number of days, it would show number of days if it was a real project. So now let's pretend I have a picture in here. So with all of these items, even though you have all this data up in here, what you also have is a blank space down here where you can put whatever your happy heart desires. So we're going to do /image, because we're going to insert an image of our finished project. Now, just for example's sake, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to pick a random picture. Pretend this is your cross stitch piece, right? Just pretend this is my project I just finished. I inserted a picture that I took from my phone or whatever, because you can do this in the app on your phone, of my picture. I can just do that. And then now in my finished area, I'm going to see projects that I have actually finished. And I'm going to see them in a picture form like this, where I can click it and open it up and I can see all of this stuff if I want, but I could also just sit here and look at all my finishes. Now, if you really wanted to, you could make a version of the whip. So let's click that plus button. Let's click gallery. let's call this whips. You could make a version of your whip log that looks very much the same as this. So again, we're gonna filter out our finish date. We're gonna say when our finish date is empty. So these are our whips. And then you could go over here to properties and you could add things like, you know, your average per day, and it'll show here, your percentage complete, and it'll show here. But then if you had a picture, again, scroll all the way down, /image, and you can add a picture. I'm just using Unsplash and I'm adding a random picture. So if you wanted to, your whip log could look like this, where you see the picture of the project and you see whatever relevant piece of information. Now notice these are not labeled. So I know this is the percentage because I see that green bar, but this isn't labeled, so I just see 240. So I just have to know what 240 means. And it depends on what kind of information you want to see. If you're really information heavy, you might want to see something more like this. This might look a little better to you. If you're really visual, this might look more fun. You can see the little progress bar down there. In fact, you could even hide those other properties. Again, 3 dots, properties. I could go up here to my average and I could click that to where it just shows me the name and the percentage. In fact, you might even be able, yep, you can even get rid of the name, because presumably if you're looking at a picture of it, you don't really need the name, you're looking at a picture of it. So I could just have a picture and my percentage complete right here if I want. So you can kind of make this look different ways. Another way that we've added onto this or expanded this is we've had a wish list section where we enter a bunch of projects with no start date or finish date, but we have the total and we have pictures of the projects and we call it our wish list. I haven't done that in this new current build, but that's certainly a possibility. So that's pretty much it. I mean, you can kind of see, you can kind of, I mean, the base build of that took us 30 minutes. Even the expanded finished version took us only half an hour. Now this does not include what I call a stitch stash. This does not include inventory. This does not include a floss log. Now I do have a floss log. This is my current stitch room area, and the reason why it looks like this with 2 different calendars is because there's 2 people using it. We're in a brand new month, so there's not a lot of data here, but we can see our projects down here. So here's me with my projects, and notice that I don't like the progress bar as much, so I just have flat numbers here because I'm a flat person, although I may change it to the pictures here in a bit. But my sister has a lot more whips than me, so you can kind of see this more in action, and she hasn't quite gotten a chance to customize it, but she can just scroll over to see all this data that she wants to her happy heart's content. She could hide things, show things. I even made this a little bit bigger so she has a little bit more bar to play with there, so she really likes that bar, so she has that for herself. So you can kind of see this in action, even if you're sharing it with someone like a sibling or someone you're doing a stitch along with. The My Projects folder, so I have my whips and I have my finishes. Now I haven't entered all of my finishes yet, I don't have very many. But you can kind of see what it might look like in action. And then over here I have my inventory. Now there's a couple ways you can do inventory. This is one that I like because I can see my floss number and then I can look across and see how many projects are connected to that floss. You know, some of my projects use the same color, and then everything else is in the box because it's in the box. Pretty self-explanatory. There's another version of this where you enter your projects again with that whole relation thing, and then you have your list of floss organized by project. And then I also have a cart section. This isn't quite finished, but the idea here is that you just simply filter it by cart, where cart is checked, and then boom. Now, right now it's empty because I have nothing in my cart. But when I'm assembling for a new project, what I can go do is go down here on the side and then check. If I need that color, I need that color, I need that color. And then when I go to my cart, boom, there's all the colors I need. And here's the projects they're associated with. So that might be a separate video. That's a little bit more of a setup because you have to manually enter your inventory if you don't have a spreadsheet. or even if you do, it's still a little tedious. So we didn't go into that here, but showing you that the possibilities are there. So I already had a video where I talked about using Notion for stitching, but the big reason why I did this second one again for you guys is to show it a little faster, to show it a little easier, and also there's some differences in how the math is done, because if you're using Pattern Keeper like I do and like many do, your numbers are not going to be accurate unless you're using that total. You can't really go by the stitch per day, the session amount. It's nice to know, it's nice to have, oh, I did 150 stitches, oh, I did 300 stitches. That's nice for your brain, but it's not actually accurate. It will mess up your totals if you use that. By doing the math the way we did, you avoid all of that, and you still get to see your per session stitching numbers, and it's so much easier to log. Now when I go to log it, I just got to enter exactly what's on the Pattern Keeper screen right in front of my face. That's all I got to do. Boom, simple. There are other programs like Markup that do all of this in the background of the program itself, but some of us are not as fond of the markup user experience. I do like Pattern Keeper. I do think that it's a little bit smoother for the actual stitching process. And the thing is, as nice as all of these statistics are, as cool as all these statistics are, I would rather the experience of using the app during the stitching be smoother, because that's what I'm actually doing 90% of the time. Most projects go on for months, years at a time, and I like the app to be smooth, so that's why I use that one. But this gives me all of that data that I want, and this is regardless of what app you're using. Could be any app because it's separate. You can always come back and log it here if you're using any app, or heck, even if you're counting by hand, which I have done. It's obviously more tedious, but there's something a little bit wild about doing it yourself. So those are for my stitching friends. Of course, if you have questions, put them in the comment. This was a lot of information kind of rapidly. Hopefully it made sense. Hopefully you were able to follow it. And again, questions in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. And until the next time I see my stitchy side of the world.